Perfect. Okay, so just as a general timeline, contraceptives they'd been around for a while, but the real main push of it was the 1960s. And then we all know, immediately following that, from beginning really in 68 and ending with the Supreme Court decision Roe v. Wade in 1973, was legalized abortion. And then 1978, which is really not that far away, was the first IVF baby, in vitro fertilization. Remember, we've covered that. So once we kind of opened Pandora's box with contraception and said that we're going to control fertility in an unnatural way, it basically, again, opened the door to a whole world of reproduction. So just to kind of address some of these predictions that were given to us, right? So they said that the number of divorces would go down because this is going to be very good for marriage. So in 1950, there were 400,000 divorces. By 1980, there was 1.4 million per year. The number of legal abortions and illegal would go down. Now, here's where the correlation causation comes in, right? So it was legalized in 1973, so obviously that makes a big difference. But you have a steady climb, by the 100,000 here, we have, by 1975, about 600,000 abortions a year. By 1980, we have 1.8 million or more. So that didn't go down either. So abortion went up. Pregnancy rates, they said, right, if we get this unwanted pregnancies would go down. Pregnancy rate in teenagers ages 15 to 29 in 1970 was about, I'm trying to read my own slide here, about 50,000 a year, and by 1980 it's 180,000, and so forth and so on. Sexually transmitted diseases increased from 1970 to 1990 astronomically. And so the question becomes, was the Pope right? Well, he was. China being the country that has levied this on their people. After your second child, you're forced to be sterilized. If you have another child, your abortion will be forced upon you. So that was right. Is there a lowering of sexual respect for women? Yes, I think pornography and the trade and prostitution and just the culture demonstrates that. And then, of course, marital infidelity, which he said, skyrocketed over those years. And the other end of it, where it said all these things would go down, it actually didn't. All those things went up. And so I say that because the church was right. The Pope was right. And so a lot of the times we may think, well, we know better, or we don't agree with whatever is being said. But the fact of the matter is that the Holy Spirit is working within that. So let me just fast forward here as I'm going to skip through all this and just give you a general sort of synopsis of natural family planning, because the Pope says, well, responsible fertility, responsible parenthood, right? So the couple discerns with generosity how many children what's best for their family. And God, from Eve on, realized that this would be the case. And so, as an average, a woman really can only get pregnant for about 24 hours a month. That's not a really long time. So, right, we said the two ends to the sexual act are love-making and baby-making. Well, clearly, the church, the Lord, all of this is saying, in marriage, it is, heavily about lovemaking. Not to be too graphic here. Because the body is set up that way. Otherwise, if God would have wanted millions, of children in each family, every single time a couple came together, they would get pregnant. But that's just not the case. And you find that with young couples. A lot of them come and they're like, it's a lot harder to have a baby than what we thought it was. Others, obviously not. And so there is a natural rhythm within a woman's cycle, and each woman is obviously different, in which the fertility of a woman can be identified. Now, I'm a certified instructor in natural family planning, the Creighton model, and I could go on, and when I taught in the Catholic schools, I would actually teach the students about this particular method, and it was amazing. I thought for sure the first year that I taught it, it was going to be this big back push, because it gets pretty graphic, right? You're talking about a woman's period, cervical mucus, all of these different things. And instead, what happened was this. Moms, confidentially and individually, discreetly came in, grown women, and were like, I'm like, okay, here it comes. I'm going to get yelled at. And we'd be like, yeah, you're teaching my daughter all about this natural family planning stuff. And I'm like, Do you think you could tell me about it? Because she's bringing all this stuff home that I don't know anything about, and these things have been going on in my body for my whole life, and I don't know what it's about. And I was like, absolutely. So 3, maybe 4 of them would come in, and I taught them the class. And now, years later in this city and across the diocese, because it's required, there is a whole culture of this wonderful program. So much so that, believe it or not, we have non-Catholics, non-Christians, that come and say, hey, we're getting married and we heard that you have natural family planning courses. No, we don't want to become Catholic, or we don't even want to become Christian, but we want to regulate our fertility naturally. And it works extremely well. Don't let the culture come back to you and be like, oh, no, it doesn't work at all. It does work. It works extremely well, especially right now with what we refer to as the Marquette method. The Marquette method is taught, I think you at least have to be a nurse in order to be trained in it, but it's all using technology. So it's not just bodily signs in a woman's body as to when she's ovulating, when the egg is present, and when it's not, but now we just check hormones. So this is what is so amazing to me about the whole thing, is that at the end of the day, this is a natural system in the body. A system that is one of God's greatest natural creations that exists. I mean, when you think the fact the angels, if they could envy anything, it would probably be that we receive the Blessed Sacrament, and secondly, that we're able to procreate another image and likeness of God. It's really quite amazing. And how the whole system, both male and female, works. You would think that this would be, because of the power that exists in marriage, a shared responsibility, meaning, and I'm celibate obviously, but I would assume one gets married because they love the person and wants to know everything about that person, their whole world. So I used to tell the boys, young men, we'll just say married, are willing to do a whole conglomerate of different things sexually with their wives. And yet they're not willing to talk about their period. It is always totally amazing. Mature men have no problem with this. And so it is a shared responsibility in which you're regulating fertility and you abstain when you don't want children. So this is the other argument. People will come and they will say, well, it's just the Catholic contraception. Like, no, this is not contraception, because contraception, the word itself is contra, against conception. You cannot contracept what you are not doing. And so if you do not want children, you are simply not having sexual intercourse. So nothing's happening. Otherwise, my whole life is one huge act of contraception, and I'm living in mortal sin all the time, okay? Obviously, it's a joke. With contraception, you are putting something into contra, against the act, that stops it from completing itself. And so natural family planning is a reverence, a profound reverence, about the greatest power that exists in the marriage, namely fertility. And if you can talk about that, and you are talking about that, you can talk about anything. And we all know marriage is about profound communication. This is, a lot of couples will run in to, problems within their sexual relationship. Either, it's not happening, or there's a disrespect, or, either way, it really can go south. Well, it's because they can't talk about it. They can do this thing, but they don't feel comfortable talking about it. Well, if you're talking about your fertility, it is a huge opening to be able to say, I do or I don't like these things. Or this is when we should or we shouldn't come together. It's not just not that people don't want it to be spontaneous, but it's more of a lively discussion around this tremendous power that exists that God has given you. Versus contraception, which really just boils down to, did you take your stuff? You can't see my slides, but for those of you from Generation X, I have Mr. Yuck. Do you remember Mr. Yuck, the green face? You'd put it on everything? No? Please, someone. I'd get it up on everyone when I taught in school. I'd put it up, and I'm like, everybody, my mom had this thing plastered over the Drano, and you name it, man. It was on it, and they had this little jingle around Mr. Yuck, and nobody knew who Mr. Yuck is anymore, which made me feel old. So, Mr. Yuck is my symbol for contraception. Now, what I want to put on the back burner for all of you is this. And we'll go right to the chemical stuff, right? We'll get into the barriers and everything else. But when we get to the chemical stuff, this is the only medicine that takes a perfectly good working system and makes it not work right. Furthermore, this is what we call equality between men and women. Women's rights, right, ladies? So in order for you to be equal to me, you have to take your part of the fertility and make it not work right. And then you can come and be equal in the workplace. I mean, I think I shared this last time. They came out with a male contraceptive a couple of years ago. Within the last couple of years, it was the rage, right? Okay, we've got the male pill. And so all these dudes showed up to take the male pill, and I think the experiment lasted a month. They all brought it back and said, yeah, it's making me sluggish. It's killing my sex drive. It's making me depressed. And all of the women came and said, it's exactly the same thing that's been happening to us for all these years. Not all of them, mind you, but portions. And that's equality. So we have many different types of contraception. And let's be honest, they're very effective, right? We have the pill, tried and true, 98% or 95% effective, somewhere in there. There's always the user rate too, right? There's if you used it perfectly, it would be this effective, and then if you use it, like everybody does, they forget to take it or whatever, it's less effective. IUD, intrauterine device, that's placed in the uterus, 97% effective. And then all of the hormonal implants are super, super, super effective. There are also the surgical ends of things, so vasectomies and tubal ligations, 99% effective. So I want to be clear, because a lot of people will be like, well, the church looks down on this because they don't understand this. No, I get it. This stuff works. That's not the issue. The issue becomes, let me just get ahead of this. I go through all of it. And I would invite you to get online yourself and look at all of the different side effects that can come from this stuff, including infertility. So from a moral perspective, we want to ask some bigger questions. Okay, so let's just start with the barrier method stuff. So we're talking diaphragms and condoms. Contra, in the way of conception. So out of all of them, this is the least as far as we're talking morally, but they would still be considered the use of them a mortal sin. Contraception as contraception is an intrinsic evil. But it's just simply a barrier, okay? Level 2 are all the hormonal agents. And this is what I would invite you to get online and read about these things, because there are tremendous side effects for some people with them. I don't have time to get into them tonight, but they can kill and have killed people. I personally, speaking for myself, believe that many of them actually render people infertile. Maybe not permanently, but for a long time. I've had friends over the years, females that were on it in high school and then on it in college, and then like got married and tried to get pregnant. And it took them 5 years of being off the thing before they were able to achieve pregnancy. And then, of course, there's the more surgical permanent methods, which are a vasectomy or a tubal ligation. I want to be very clear, too, that a hysterectomy or a partial hysterectomy, that's not this. That's a medical procedure that's needed many times for a woman's health. There also may be the situations where the pill, in particular, is the only medicine, hormonal agent that we're able to administer, at least now, for certain conditions that a woman may face. Endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, I think I'm saying that correctly. But my question there is there any other medicine where you go to the doctor and it's the same thing? I mean, imagine if I showed up and I got chemotherapy for strep throat, or there was only one antibiotic. For some reason, this is like, here, you don't want to have a baby, we'll give you the pill. You got endometriosis, we'll give you the pill. You got polycystic ovarian syndrome, we'll give you the pill. We'll give you the pill, we'll give you the pill, we'll give you the pill. Is that medicine that awesome that it is just the magic thing for every single thing that exists? Well, there has got to be more research out there for underlying pathologies, and maybe there is and I don't know about it. But my whole point would be that I think more research needs to be done. So, all of them then are intrinsically evil because all of them prevent conception in an unnatural way, which gets into the ends that Pope Paul VI talks about, meaning procreation and unity, lovemaking and baby making. And people will get on the church for that. So what? Get your hands off my body. Well, I think it's very easily explained. I mean, you've heard me say it before, but if I gave you, a medicine that made you go blind, that would be illegal. Or it made your heart stop working, that would be illegal, right? Or made you become crippled, they'd put me in prison. So why is it that this is the one organ system that we can make not work right? We all agree on the rest of them. This one, though, we don't. And frankly, I'm really curious by the end of my life as to the long-term science on this, like what this stuff has caused. So for example, there's been like a 1,200% increase in breast cancer. It's very similar to Philip Morris, R.J. Reynolds. They knew that smoking cigarettes cause cancer. If you want to smoke cigarettes, smoke cigarettes. And this is not a smoking cigarettes lecture. But they knew it caused cancer, and they lied to everybody. And while they were lying and selling their cigarettes, they banked up all this money and made huge profits, knowing all the while that maybe in the future they would get sued. Right, so all of a sudden now the lawsuits come and they still made a profit. They're still around, okay? It's the same thing with Pfizer and Lilly and the rest of these drug companies. Like, the pill is a major moneymaker. And they may know long in advance that either it sterilizes women, causes certain types of cancers, who knows what other things. And eventually that will out, probably towards the end of my life. And when it does, they will take the coffers of investments that they built over the years on the backs of people that they damaged, and they will pay out whatever they want because they will have still made a profit. Remember, it's never about what they say it's about ideologically or the narrative. It's not about women's rights. It's not about equality. It's not about even fertility regulations. It's about money. It is always about money. So on the proximate end of the act, we are blocking conception to a certain end, and this might seem a little over the top, but it is also blocking unity, right? Because contraception says what? I want all of you but your fertility. And what we do with our bodies, we do with our souls. So if you have a marriage that's contracepted constantly, the soul of the two people is feeling that. I'm giving myself all of myself to you as a gift. However, there's this one little thing I'm holding back. And we say, well, the greatest act of consummation that saved our souls ever to exist is the cross. If Jesus would have held back just a little, would that be okay with you? So you're just sort of saved. Maybe your foot gets to go to hell. No! Nobody wants any of us to be in hell, right? We want to be totally and absolutely loved. And whether we realize it in marriage or not, that's what the act does. That's why we've already said this, but when kids get into this prior to marriage and then they break up, it feels like they got a divorce. Because the act always does what it's supposed to do. That's why God is not some prude. He's not sitting there up in heaven saying, I created the sexual act, but you got to do it in the dark. No, he knows how powerful this thing is. And when we mess with it, bad things come from it. When you make good systems work wrongly or you use things in the wrong way, it will mess us up. And that's what, he doesn't want to have happen. He wants us to be as free and happy and in all things as we can possibly be. God, this is not a limiting God. I mean, look at the abundance of things that we have on earth. God loves life, loves love, loves family, loves humanity, and wants us to have it to the fullest. But when we use it wrongly, we imprison ourselves and damage ourselves, which is, terribly unfortunate. So, if you look at NFP and marriage and the sexual act, it says, I want all of you, including your fertility, every single iota of it. I want to know all of you, no matter what that might look like, or in the terms of the society, which is real women's rights. It just upsets me when they're like, the guys would always be like, I don't want to hear about the period. And it's like, really? Really? You're that immature that you can't handle talking about a woman's cycle. It's the most masculine thing that there is. Real men do that. So it's a reverence around the fertility of the marriage, a reverence around the love, a reverence around children, total acceptance, natural, healthy. Cycle gets off. That's another one. It's a great one, right? Well, it's not great, but cycle gets off. Women's been charting for all these years, and all of a sudden something's not right. Wouldn't notice otherwise. Boom, into the doctor. Oh, a little bit of cancer. Caught it right away. Right? Totally responsible, medical. Versus contraception. Manipulating the body, making something not work right. It's totally on her. Did you take your stuff? Yeah, I love you, but I don't want all of you. It's a very simple discernment. Which one looks more like God? Questions? That was 126 slides, everybody. If anybody would like to really get into NFP, Father's an instructor and he can teach you. Okay, we're going to rock this out then, and we should be finished tonight. Seventh commandment, you shall not steal. So, this commandment gives us a foundation for the right to private property acquired in a just way and the universal destination of goods in the earth. So you have a right to property and things that belong to you, that are justly acquired. Political authority, the Catechism says, has the right and the duty to regulate the legitimate exercise of the ownership of things for the common good, which that's common sense, we know that. And the seventh commandment clearly forbids theft. Now, I think, we understand what theft is. I mean, you take something you've obviously stolen, but there's a lot of different types of theft, right? How about morally illicit work? Okay? Work poorly done. So you're working for an employer and you don't give an honest day's pay, an honest day's work for an honest day's wage. On the other end, you are an employer and you don't give an honest day's wage for an honest day's work. Tax evasion. Come see me in private about that one. Because there's a lot of people will come in with a lot of questions and we're just not going to answer those on the internet. But there is legitimate, write-offs and all of that stuff. And I have, walked with people over the years when they're looking at certain things. And yeah, if it's legitimate, it's it's there, okay? But just, we all know what tax evasion is. Forgery of checks, invoices, excessive expenses, and waste, right? St. John Chrysostom was known for the saying, if you have two coats in your closet, one belongs to you and one belongs to the person that doesn't have one and can't afford one. I don't know what that says about us Americans. How many coats do you have? Willfully damaging private or public property. And many of these things require reparation, which is sort of interesting. It's the one thing when you come to confession that the priest does have the option. Let's hypothetical situation, so you show up and you stole a car. Okay? Well, can you give the car back? No, I'd get caught. Well, then you can't do that because that would violate the seal of confession. But could you sell the car? Yeah, and give the money to the poor. Right? So you're making restitution for what you have taken. Sometimes that can be attributed, or at least given in prayer, right? Almsgiving prayer, things like that. Moving on, promises must be kept, contracts observed. And then we reference Jesus with Zacchaeus, the tax collector. Remember, he says, if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will restore it fourfold. And Jesus respects that. Now, this gets a little bit deeper when we talk about respect and integrity for creation, right? God entrusted all of creation to us and to be stewards of that creation. Hence, it is legitimate to use animals for food and clothing. They may be domesticated to help man in his work. You may hunt them, as well as take leisure in them. Medical and scientific experimentation on animals is morally acceptable if it remains within the reasonable limits, and it must contribute to the caring and saving of human lives. A lot of people have questions on that. We also obviously owe respect to the creation as a whole, which is, that a lot of talk about that these days. But I think if you just look at the history, even of the last 100 years, there's clearly times that we have, terribly damaged the earth or the environment, or just wasted. I remember my dad telling me that I think it was the 1980s. They were dumping, ships of wheat into the ships, the wheat in the ships into the ocean to keep the wheat prices high. Well, when you have starving people in the third world and we're dumping food into the, or you think of just the sheer amount of waste that happens in a grocery store, in the United States, we need to do a better job there. From the perspective of the church, human work, which is covered under this commandment, is of extreme value. That's why the church is, one of the reasons the church is totally against communism. Your individual property has meaning. Your individual work has worth. And you are just not some clog in the machine of the state. You're an individual that God respects all of these things with. And so there's an encyclical letter written by Leo XIII called Rerum Novarum. Look it up. He actually came up with a lot of things that that we're using now. But it was a lot of respect for work, hourly wages, things like that God is saying one of the most profound and meaningful things that we do as humans is work. It's really quite interesting. If you think about it, what are we going to be doing forever? Don't worry, there'll be plenty of leisure. But it's study. Really what we do is we harness God makes it, like the raw material, and then we, who are in the image and likeness of God, have the capacity and the ability to learn how to mold that and study it and make it into other things. And so heaven only knows what he's got planned for the next life. But if he's made this and it's as wonderful as it is, imagine what he's actually capable of. But that work is extremely important, and in that work we discover a lot about ourselves. Access to employment and professions must be open without unjust discrimination. 1 for both men and women, healthy and disabled, natives and immigrants. A just wage is the legitimate fruit of work. To refuse or withhold it is a grave injustice. Rich nations, the Catechism says, have a grave moral responsibility towards those unable to ensure the means of their development by themselves. So we are obviously called to help poor nations. I think there's a clarity, though, that needs to be given there, because thus far, our way of doing that is printing money and sending it, to other countries, and we all know what happens there. It goes to the poor and helps everyone. No. It goes to the government, and the government steals it, and the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Well, we, have our beautiful society here. And so, having been on several mission trips myself, as an American, as a Catholic, in which talent, whether it be, anywhere from, you name it, medical to contractors to, whatever talent you have, even if it's just labor, go in a group and work with the people of that country to better themselves. That is, in my opinion, what this whole thing is all about. The only difference between the United States and most of the third world is that we have education. Because we were founded as a Christian country, and the nuns and the priests and all of the people that came before us established all of these things, hospitals, universities, and so our society is taken care of. We're educated and formed and in trades and in intellectual disciplines and all these different things, and hence it gives way to prosperity. The gospel always gives way to prosperity. And so you find in these more, underdeveloped countries that didn't happen a lot of the times. And so they need more education, access to universities, and out of that, they're just like us. You give this, what we have, to any other culture in the world, or I should say any other people, and they're going to emerge exactly the same way. Everything is all about culture. And so it doesn't do them any good for us to just give them handouts. It doesn't do anybody any good in this country to just get a handout. Right? They need to be given the resources to better themselves, and what person doesn't want that, right? I think everybody says, no, they want handouts, and I don't think so. I think most people would rather be proud of the work that they're doing and the wage that they're making doing the work versus totally dependent upon whatever, and that goes from very micro to macro situations with nations. The Catechism does say, though, that to not enable the poor to share in goods of the earth is to steal from them and deprive them of life. The goods we possess are not ours, but theirs. The demands of justice must be satisfied first of all. That which is already due in justice is not to be offered as a gift of charity, right? So we're all doing good, and we're speaking as middle class. You get into these upper realms of money. Those people have a duty to help. Countries in that situation have a duty to help, and it's not a gift of charity. It's a duty. God gave you all of this, not so that we can stockpile it and sit on a mound, and have a huge hedge around us, but that's so we're able to do good. And I'm telling you, the people that I've seen do this over the years, this church is a wonderful example of it. People gave in the capacity that they had, and they're proud of it. You come to funerals or weddings or even this tonight. It's nice to be here. God's home is everybody's home. Rich or poor, whatever wedding dress you're in, every bride looks just stunning up here on this altar because it's God's house that looks so amazing, right? And it belongs to everybody. And it's the same with so many, many, many other things. When you really have people with it doesn't matter what capacity they have to give, but when they start giving and they see the fruits of what comes out of what God's going to do with their gift, people can't help but to feel good. And that's because that's what's normal and natural to us, right? To finish out then, the last two commandments really basically, the eighth commandment, the last three, shall not bear false witness. Obviously there's lying, and then the last two deal with coveting neighbor's goods as well as a neighbor's property. Questions? Comments? Praise. Well, it's been a delight having everyone. And if it's your second time through, thank you for coming. Students, as I've said before, if your parents have attended this with you, you should go home and say you're the best mom and dad ever, because they took time out of their schedules to come. And I hope it was very beneficial for everybody. We all need a little bit of an update, especially those of us in Generation X. We have to be honest, we didn't get anything. And it's nice to come and really get kind of the gist of the whole faith. If you get anything out of this course at all, it should be that the Catholic faith is the most intellectual construct of, just a construct, a whole world view that Jesus left, and that's the foundation. And so it makes sense. If you don't agree with something or you don't understand something, research it, and it will always make sense to you. So if you get stumped up later, go back to the catechism, get on Catholic Answers or whatever it might be, and look it up. And that's the second part of it, is that there's always an answer to everything. Nobody, including the priest, should never say to you, just do it because. No, you should say, let me find the answer for you, because we are an intellectual people, and God is obviously, a smart intellectual God that is communicating normally with us. And he is going to explain things to you as to why he made the thing the way it is through the church and why we believe what we believe. Now, you might get to the answer and say, I don't agree with that. And that's where faith and obedience comes in. But it will never not make sense. Because there's a lot of things in life out there that when we finally get down to the meat and potatoes of it, just don't make sense. And that never sat well with me. I can remember growing up and religion teachers telling me, well, that's just what we believe. And it's like, well, it's got to be a reason. And there is a reason, always a reason. Just don't leave the faith, everyone. Question it all you want, just don't leave it. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you and grant you his peace. And may Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. This concludes the course, and so we are finished for the year, and we will see all of you for confirmation whenever that is, next fall, I think, I believe. So God bless you all.